Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on September 19th, 2023. We are now live on YouTube and it's great to see all those attending in person. Welcome. And to everyone tuning in on TV or the live stream. I'll do a roll call of council to start. I'm Mayor Johnson, present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryan. Present. Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau is on Zoom.
Present.
Councillor Schwint.
Present.
And Councillor Grant sends her regrets for tonight. I'll start by acknowledging the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and Indigenous people have been here from time immemorial. And I want to thank the Chinatan, also called the Attawandaron or Neutral people, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee people, who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. There could be lots of reasons to have a moment of silence this evening. All you have to do is turn on the news channel to look at I guess climate changes and the tragedies that have happened all over the world. So for the moment of silence, I'm just going to let you pick your own meditation, I suppose, for a moment. So join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of communities? Seeing none. We have minutes from Council of August 8th and Committee of the Whole from September 12th. Would someone like to move those? Councillor Bryan, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We have no public meetings. We do have a first presentation, and that is on the audited statements. And we'll call on Matthew Beddick, partner at KPMG, and Richard Patrick, Director of Financial Services and Treasurer, to present the 2022 audited financial services. I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can introduce.
Good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as you said, we have Matt Beddick, who's a partner with KPMG. KPMG is our auditing firm. And so this is new for a number of you on council of receiving these audited statements. So the reason why it's before you is because council acts as the audit committee for the township. And so a couple of things just to say that are contained within the report before I turn it over to Matt, and he will present you the audit findings report or statement. So just to kind of say to council, we did talk about a little bit through the budget process that we develop our budgets on a modified cash basis, but we report, and specifically from the audited statements, on the full accrual accounting. So that means in these statements, we have the amortization from tangible capital assets, as well as post-employment and the GBE, or our government business entity, which is Innova. So that is all contained within these consolidated statements. And specifically on our Innova investment, I think that's one of the big things I want to highlight in our statements with the merger of Watershed and Kitchener Power Corp. You'll see that there is a significant gain. It's a non-cash gain of just over $28 million, and that is now reflected on our audited statements for 2022. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt to run through the audit findings report, and then I'll be happy to take questions, or Matt and I will both be happy to take questions from the council.
Okay, awesome. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, and thanks, Rich. So I'll take a few minutes to walk through our presentation. I won't touch on every slide. I'll take it as read, or at least skim through. I'll touch on the highlights, and as usual, I'll have some time for questions at the conclusion. So as Rich quite rightly mentioned, we've completed our audit work on the township's financial statements for the 2022 year. We're here now to present those findings as well as to obtain evidence that council approves of the financial statements. At that time, we will be in a position to issue the financial statements in their final form with our audit opinion attached. The audit opinion that we intend to attach is a clean one, so there are no qualifications or modifications, which is what you would expect. Throughout the presentation, I will go over a handful of matters that are either required to be presented and disclosed to this committee, or other matters that we feel are important for the committee or council's attention. So the first item to talk about is the concept of materiality in the preparation of financial statements and in the conduct of financial statement audit. So we set materiality for two purposes. First, to set our scoping and extent of testing that we do on the transactions and the accounts, as well as to evaluate to the extent there are any uncorrected errors or differences we find in the financial statements. We set materiality at approximately 2% of total revenue, so that sits at around $700,000. It is adjusted this year to remove the impact of the Innova gain, which Rich mentioned before, to sort of normalize those amounts. Now, usually a question I get when I talk about materiality at a level of 700,000 or 2% of total revenues is that that's a pretty high number. And clearly, staff and council manage the finances of the township to a much lower level than that, and that would be expected. However, when we think about the concept of materiality, we ask ourselves, given that there are revenues of over $30 million, almost $35 million, if your revenues were higher or lower by an amount sort of less than $700,000, would somebody looking at those financial statements come to a different conclusion as to the size, scope, and operations of the municipality? And I think when we look at it from that perspective, it makes some more sense. Furthermore, we do go into much more granular level of testing than that level. And we do look at, any and all transactions and accounts are subject to tests throughout our audit process. Furthermore, as Rich said, the township prepares its budget on a modified cash basis, and these financial statements are prepared on a full accrual basis. And so there are significant differences, and one of the attachments to the report from staff outlines what those differences are. But I would say what council can take from these financial statements is comfort over the underlying books and records and accounts of the municipality, regardless of whether or not they're prepared from a budgetary perspective or a full accrual perspective in the financial statements. And as I will talk later in the presentation, or I'll mention now, based on the test work that we did not find any items that required adjusting to the financial statements. And what that really means is that the accounts and records that we received were in good shape. They didn't need to be corrected, adjusted, nor did we find any errors that needed to be amended to make these financial statements the way they are and to issue a clean audit opinion. So this is a good thing. As I walk into some of the audit risks and results areas, so we are required in the conduct of any audit to consider the risk that the financial statements may be intentionally manipulated due to fraud. And so we're not talking really, when we say fraud, about how the township may be a victim from an outside source, like a cyber attack or hacking or something like that. We're talking about how internally there could be incentives or opportunities or rationalizations to intentionally manipulate the accounting records so to achieve a different outcome. So this isn't unique to the township. We have to do this for all audits performed in Canada for any entity, no matter how big or small that it is. We have a number of standard routines that we apply to respond to this risk. And I'm happy to say, based on those activities that we've undertaken, we have no findings to report whatsoever, again, which is a good thing. Looking at some of the specific accounts in the financial statements, I won't go through them on a line-by-line basis, but highlight some of the major areas. So the first, and Rich mentioned, the post-employment benefits. So these are sick leave and other types of benefits that employees may receive when they're not working. These do require an actuary, a third-party actuary, to calculate, as there are significant estimates and assumptions built into those. We do work directly with that actuary, and we assess the reasonableness of assumptions and make sure that those calculations are done properly. No issues or concerns identified there. Next, we talk about tangible capital assets. So these are all the assets that the township holds and uses and maintains in the provision of services within the municipality. So these includes roads, bridges, buildings, vehicles, water and wastewater infrastructure, pretty much anything you can think of. It is the largest single item on the financial statements, and as a result, it is an area of significant focus for us. We do look at a number of transactions that have been recorded as capital to make sure that they are in fact capital in nature and meet the test. And we also look at how those assets are amortized, or the expense for those is reported through the financial statements, and make sure that makes sense. And again, no issues or concerns to identify here. The area of obligatory reserve fund revenue and deferred revenue is a bit unique. So what we're talking really about here is mostly development charges. And why this is interesting is that in the financial statements that are reported on, the accounting for development charges may differ from how you would think about them. So we show revenue from development charges only when the related expenses are incurred, not when the development charges are collected. So as you well know, in many cases, development charges are collected in advance of the related development expenditures being incurred. And so those collections that are coming in are recorded on the statement of financial position as deferred revenue, and only cycle back through revenue when the township spends the money on development related expenses. And we've tested both the ins and the outs of these transactions and found that everything was in order. The last area of focus I will talk about is the impact of the merger between Waterloo North Hydro and Kitchener Power Corp to create Innova. As we know, that took effect on September 1st of 2022. There is some fairly complex accounting that went in beyond that, and we will see a fairly significant gain of nearly $28 million being recorded in the financial statements. As Rich quite rightly mentioned, this is a non-cash gain, so it didn't come with any cash. And really, effectively what it does is it records the fair value of the township's investment in Innova at that date, and compares it to the old value that you had in Waterloo North Hydro, which was not a fair value, but it was an accounting value. And so therefore, you will see a gain being recorded. On a go-forward basis, we won't revalue that investment. It will stay at the amount that it currently sits. And then any dividends that are received from Innova will be recorded as income in that year. As I mentioned before, there were no items that we identified that required correction in the financial statements, and we did not identify any significant deficiencies in internal control. So I think what council can take from our report, if you take nothing else, are sort of three things that we look at in conjunction with each other. We don't have any significant control deficiencies. We didn't have any corrections to the financial statements, and we have a clean audit opinion. So those are sort of the trifecta of green check marks that we're giving the process this year. Again, it is a good thing, and you should be proud of it. The final thing that I'll speak about to this slide before I pause the formal presentation for questions is the impact of additional or new accounting policies for next year. And so for the 2023 financial statements, there is now going to be a requirement to record a new liabilities. And these liabilities are what we refer to as asset retirement obligations. And they refer to any future outflows to take an asset or decommission an asset where you are required. So the most common example we're seeing in the municipal sector for asset retirement obligations is the requirement to remediate asbestos in township-owned buildings. So where you do have buildings that may have asbestos in it, well, if you do nothing, and it can sit there and it's not harmful at all, we do know that when renovation or decommission or other type of activity that disturbs it is going to go on, there is a remediation process that has to be undertaken. What this standard will do will require the township to identify all those situations and record a liability in the financial statements for the eventual remediation of that issue. There are a handful of other types of obligations that may be recorded, but that one is the most common. So with that, I will pause for questions and any other comments from staff. Back to the chair.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Bryant.
Excuse me. I have one question. When we merged with Kitchener-Waterloo, we went from 20.2% ownership down to 8.5. Is this going to affect the amount of dividends and interest we get, or are we going to get more or less than what we did previously?
Mr. Pepper.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. From the interest perspective, no. So we have, it's called a junior debt investment. So that amount actually stays the same. What would fluctuate is the interest rate. So that's what could up or down the interest income we receive from that. From the dividend perspective, we are expecting to see greater dividends from the merger, really specifically because as part of the merger, the first 10 years, we, as the corporation or NOVA, is allowed to retain the cost savings from efficiencies that are going to be gained because of the merger. And after that 10 years, they would have to give them back to the ratepayers. So we will be expecting greater dividends in the years to come.
Okay, and one quick follow-up. What are we going to do with the extra money, basically, that we're going to make on this?
So right now, and we will get into a little bit into the quarterly statements, because we have received additional income or additional dividend income for 2023, and it's related to 2022's year. So right now, a couple of things we could do with it. I'm recommending so far this year to put it away into reserve. But in future years, we can actually choose as a council whether you want to incorporate that within the operating budget, whether you want to put it into the operating contingency, into another reserve fund. That will be something we can discuss as we get as part of the budget process. I can say that from the previous council, there was a direction to try to keep what we have currently in the budget static, and then anything above and beyond that, we would be able to put somewhere else. And it was because for a couple of years there, we were actually sort of going up and down in our dividends, and they sort of played a little bit of havoc to our actuals in the budget. And this way, at least we're at a fixed point in time, and anything above and beyond that, we can actually put where we need to.
Thank you.
Other questions? No, I don't see any. You must have done a great job, Mr. Vedek.
Well, actually, it was staff that did a great job. So thanks to Rich and their staff for all their assistance throughout. We couldn't be at this point without that.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I will say thank you to Mr. Petherick and his staff. I know this last year, I think he's been a little bit short-staffed, and that might be an understatement.
Yeah.
So it's been a tough slog, I think. So thank you very much for another clean audit and for all the work that you contributed. Okay. Thank you. Oh, you've got, yes. Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Right.
Recommendation.
You want to, sorry, okay. I'll look over here. I need a motion to approve the consolidated financial statements and to direct the treasurer to publish in a newspaper a notice that the audited financial statement will be made available. Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So next on the agenda, we were going to welcome Miss Earth Canada who lives in Breslau. I don't think she's here unless she's online. May have been held up in traffic. So I think what we'll do, one of her areas of interest and concern was intimate partner violence. And so we paired that up with a notice of motion and another delegation. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through that, and when she arrives, we'll let her do her presentation, whenever that would be. So let's hear from our joint delegation. And that is Jenna Mabey from Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region, Amy Hackworth from the Waterloo Region Police Services, Lisa Aki from Camino Wellbeing and Mental Health, and Christine Taylor from the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Treatment Center of St. Mary's General Hospital. So thank you for coming, and welcome to the podium. We look forward. I got to hear most of this presentation. I'm assuming it's very similar at Regional Council. And I think you'll find it interesting too. So thank you and welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having us. Yes, we have a PowerPoint here. Great. So, Mayor Shantz and honored councilors, we come before you today to respectfully request that you declare intimate partner violence an epidemic in the township of Woolwich. Thank you for this opportunity to delegate. We are representatives of the Family Violence Project of Waterloo Region. I am Jenna Main, Communications and Fund Development Manager at Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. And I have with me Amy Hatchborn, Staff Sergeant of the Waterloo Regional Police Intimate Partner Violence Unit, Christine Taylor, Manager of the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Treatment Center of St. Mary's Hospital, and Lisa Aki, Director of Counseling for Camino Wellbeing and Mental Health. The Family Violence Project was launched in 2006 by 12 partner agencies, which came together in collaboration because they believed more needed to be done to address intimate partner violence in our community. The Family Violence Project was the first of its kind in Canada, and more than 17 years later, we are still here, still committed to the reduction and prevention of intimate partner violence. Next slide, please. We stand before you today regarding the deaths of Carol Culleton, Anastasia Kuzak, and Natalie Warmadam on September 22nd, 2015, at the hands of the same intimate partner. As you may know, an inquest into these deaths was held in June of 2022 in Pembroke, Ontario. The inquest jury heard from many experts from across the province and beyond, as well as from witnesses who were involved in the events leading up to and on that day. It also heard from those working in the field of intimate partner violence, such as the Waterloo Regional Police Service, and most importantly, from intimate partner violence survivors. The testimony provided throughout the inquest was tragic, powerful, and informative. The jury returned 86 significant recommendations, and it is about these recommendations we are speaking to you today. Next slide, please. We would like to paint a picture for you. This picture is a landscape that reveals the tragic history and nature of intimate partner violence in Woolwich Township. Like every other community in Ontario and across Canada, intimate partner violence lives here. Each day, its harsh realities are brought to bear on its citizens. It destroys families, it ruins lives and livelihoods, and it causes trauma that can last a lifetime and extend beyond a generation. What does intimate partner violence look like in Woolwich Township? It is an important question, and we will answer it by sharing some key statistics from over the past 10 years, so we all understand the magnitude of this issue in our community. From 2012 to 2022, the Waterloo Regional Police Service responded to 1,099 calls for service involving intimate partner violence in the township. This is an average of over 109 calls per year. According to the 2021 census, the population of this township was 26,999. This means that up to 4% of its citizens were involved in an intimate partner violence incident over this period. The number of calls peaked in 2020 at 125. This could be related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is believed to have been very hard on rural areas where isolation is a concern. A total of 446 charges were laid for intimate partner violence, with the number of charges laid in 2022 being 148% higher than those laid in 2012. And there was one family-related homicide during this time period.
And this only highlights those who struggle come to the attention of the police. Each year, countless women, children, and men seek support from various agencies across the region. From the agencies you see here before you today, Women's Crisis Services, between 2012 and 2022, they provided shelter to a total of 4,875 clients, both women and children, representing 443 clients per year. They provided outreach services for intimate partner violence to 10,630 clients, and this represents an average of 966 clients per year. And they also provided crisis support to a total of 27,210 clients through their crisis support line. This represents an average of 2,474 clients per year. Next slide, please. Communal Wellbeing and Mental Health, who are also here tonight, along with the Counseling Collaborative, consistently supports more than 1,800 clients per year impacted by intimate partner violence. Since 2020, the request for counseling related to family and relationship conflict has increased dramatically. Family and relationship conflict is a precursor to intimate partner violence and is now the third most common reason that individuals, couples, and families seek counseling support after anxiety and depression. It's estimated that 33% of incidents of intimate partner violence are witnessed by children, which has devastating consequences on their long-term health and emotional well-being, and can contribute to a cycle of intergenerational violence. At the Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Treatment Center at St. Mary's Hospital, since 2020, we've observed a marked increase in the levels of violence and injury to victims of intimate partner violence who present to St. Mary's Hospital and Cambridge Hospital emerge. Prior to 2020, incidents in which women were assaulted with a weapon, strangled, or forcibly confined were not commonplace. We now routinely see these cases in hospital and note a significant increase in the severity of the intimate partner violence cases we're seeing. Between January 2022 and June 2023, so the past year and a half, the center responded to 107 cases of acute intimate partner violence and 234 cases of sexual violence in the emerged departments of St. Mary's and Cambridge hospitals. Between that same period, January 2022 to June 2023, 140 survivors of acute intimate partner violence accessed our center's counseling services, as did 50 victims of acute sexual violence. And the statistic that speaks to the very nature of IPV and the challenge in combating this complex problem is nationally between 30 and 70% of victims do not seek help. So if even 30% more victims came forward, how significant would this issue be in Woolwich Township?
Next slide, please. The first recommendation of the inquest jury is to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines an epidemic as affecting or trending to affect a disproportionately large number of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. The statistics we just shared on the local experience make it clear that this definition has been met. As such, we're asking you to declare for our community, for our victims, and for our survivors, and for our future. And you're not alone in considering this matter. Then our county council was the first to make this declaration on December 21st, 2022. And since that time, over 46 municipalities have followed suit, including the City of Ottawa, Durham Region, Burlington City Council, Peel Region, City of Toronto, City of Hamilton, City of Kitchener, and last week, the Region of Waterloo Council and the City of Cambridge Council. The benefits of this declaration for Woolwich Township are significant. It will serve as a resounding reminder to all victims of intimate partner violence and their families that the Township of Woolwich recognizes their struggle, and is here to support them. Next slide, please. In Woolwich, there are two main services that provide DAW counseling, which are Woolwich Community Services and Woolwich Counseling Services. Last year, they served over 100 individuals at each agency for violence against women through their services. An additional 50 children were served at Woolwich Counseling that were dependents of individuals who experienced intimate partner violence. And that amounts in their combined agencies to over 3,000 hours of service in the long term. It will serve notice to all offenders that intimate partner violence in your community has no place, and those will be held accountable for their action. It will be a message of encouragement to the employees of your local agencies that are engaged in intimate partner violence work, that their work is taken seriously and it's an integral part of the health of our community. It will continue the long-standing tradition that our townships are leaders in the development of social policy and community well-being, and it won't cost anything, even though its value will be immense. It will start a conversation locally and will contribute to a movement that is occurring provincially to the Ontario provincial government to make this declaration.
Thank you. That was good timing. I was going to say, don't worry about the bell. And you timed it perfectly. Thank you very much for that. Are there questions? Councilor Bryant.
Thank you. I don't know who could answer this one, but I'm looking at the motion that you're going to be bringing forward, and one part of it says racialized women and Indigenous women experience disproportionately high rates of violence, and especially with the Indigenous. Do we know why they face a much higher rate of violence than the other communities?
Well, you know, I think although there's no easy answer, no simple answer, I think it has to do with the history of being socially marginalized through the history of colonization and residential schools and so on, and not having access to the same sorts of resources and mainstream resources and supports that people do in large city centers, but particularly the number one reason is social marginalization. They face those barriers, and on top of that, then it is doubly and triply difficult for them to access mainstream supports, feel welcome, feel safe, feel heard, feel understood, and feel that those supports will be responsive to their unique cultural needs. So it's sort of an issue or a problem that's multi-layered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Are there other questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for the presentation and for being here, and we'll talk about the motion, and you're welcome to stay until we're done. And I think you can stay till meeting if you like. If you don't mind staying till we're finished, in case we have some other questions, maybe as we go through the motion. Thank you very much. So I put a notice of motion last week for council's consideration, and I'd like to have a discussion on that, and if someone wants to bring it forward, that'd be great. Councilor Schmidt.
Should I make the motion as printed with the addition of 0.7, that now therefore be it resolved, Township Council, that the Council of Township of Woolwich direct staff to donate $1,000 to Woolwich Community Services to support their efforts in addressing intimate partner violence.
Is there a seconder for that? Councilor Brian. Discussion. Councilor Cadell.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, when I have the floor, I just want to thank the delegation for coming here and presenting some stark figures that are specific to Woolwich. I think that it really puts things into perspective. I've spent quite a bit of time in corrections. In fact, I was with the ministry in 2015 when this incident happened, and I remember sitting at my desk and going through some of these files and how terrible the situation was. I know a lot of the pushback from the inquest recommendation has been around the choice of language, but I think that the delegation did a fantastic job tonight in pointing out that this truly is an epidemic. So with that, I fully support this motion. And again, I thank the mayor for bringing this forward, and I thank the delegation for coming and really presenting on this.
Anyone else? Yeah, I'll call the question, then all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you again, ladies, for coming and presenting to us, and for all the work you do in the community. The stats are scary and sometimes disheartening. And I know I sit on the police board too, and so we hear some of the stories of the situations where they have to deal with it, and yeah, it's difficult. So thank you very much for all you do. Thank you for the presentation. I hope the motion helps. Okay. Okay, we have 2 delegations this evening on the Middlebrook Bridge for a request for reconsideration. The first 2 we have is Stephanie Lanxness and Mark Walker of the Save the Middlebrook Bridge Group. I understand you've been given 10 minutes since there's 2 of you, so welcome and begin when you're ready.
Thank you so much. Mayor Shanson and Council, thank you for hearing our delegation this evening. I am Stephanie Lanxness, whoops. And I'm here to represent the Save Middlebrook Bridge Group with Mark Walker and our group ally Anne Crow from the Grand Waterways Trail Network. And we also have Councillor Lisa McDonald from Central Wellington Council, who surprisingly joined us, which was very nice. Thank you. We won't be using all the slides because we have too many. I've never used a slideshow myself, so I learned a lot from the previous delegation. So we'll just keep it on that slide. Thank you. Our group and its ally groups of approximately 3,000 members consider the closure and scheduled removal of Middlebrook Bridge to be a detriment to our community and all who use our trailways and safe connector routes across our beautiful rural corridor. We ask that you reconsider previous council decision to remove Middlebrook Bridge without replacement and instead work with Central Wellington Council, who voted in favour of reconsideration on July the 31st, to find alternative funding solutions for the deficit between removal costs already budgeted and rehabilitation or replacement for pedestrian active transportation use. We are not asking for extra funding. We are asking that you vote to reconsider so that other options can be explored. For example, regional, federal, provincial grants, sponsorships, etc. No funding alternatives can be researched without both Woolwich and Central Wellington Township in agreement to reconsider, as the bridge is a shared asset between the two due to its position on the boundary. Mark Walker will expand on finances and Anne Crow on its important position for connectivity. So if I could have the next slide, please. This is just briefly letting you know that this particular structure was moved here in 1946. It is a rare example of a pin-connected steel Pratt Camelback Food Trust Bridge, single lane, single span, all the bells and whistles of a gorgeous truck bridge. And it's only one of 4 surviving in the region of Waterloo. And we have a more extensive map later in the presentation, so we'll just click on to slide 4, please. Thank you so much. So why are we advocating for the rehabilitation of this particular bridge? It is a very important safe connector route for active transportation to the G2G, the Cotton Trail Road Trail, and I can't see the rest of the words. Thank you. The Elora Guelph Trail, the Grand Valley Hiking Trail, the Trans-Canada Trail, and also to many low traffic rural roads. That's very important to remember. Many people use this as an alternative, safe connector route away from dangerous vehicular roads. It is also an access to nature point to the Grand River Heritage Watershed. Many people go to this bridge as a destination point. It is in a serene, beautiful bend of the Grand River. A diverse section of our community and beyond use the river to gather, have picnics, meet with their friends. It is also pedestrian access to the Grand Valley Trailway, which right now is blocked. It is, as I said earlier, it's a rare structural example of a pin-connected steel truss bridge. It is a very important, well-known historic landmark via River Orland that offers connection to our heritage, our rural landscape, and our sense of place as part of the Grand Watershed Trails Network. It is a gorgeous visiting place of natural beauty for wildlife observation and a popular brown trout fishing point. Many people go there. It's well known across North America as excellent brown trout fishing. Many families, before it was closed, you would find many families teaching their children to fish there. I once met twin brothers aged 94 who came and reminiscing about their childhood there. A lot of our Mennonite communities gathered at the bridge for crossing and for picnicking. And I am now going to skip to slide 10, please. And I'm going to hand you over to Mark Walker. And I thank you for your meaningful engagement with this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So slide 10 is really highlighting the fact that we have previously identified 7, not we, the route plan study EA that was done in 2018, identified 7 alternatives at this location and the costs associated with them. You can see them on the screen there. It's maybe a little premature to be talking about costs, because really what we're here is to ask council to reconsider their earlier position to demolish the bridge. But we're thinking that there are these 7 options here, alternatives that have been discussed previously. Some of them are more reasonable than others, namely alternative 3 is the one that was chosen, which is full demolition, no replacement, and that action to take place somewhere around 2028, I believe. And both Senator Wellington and Woolwich Council had decided that previously. That's what we're looking to have reconsidered. When we talked previously about this bridge, we were really pushing for alternatives 4, which is as a preferred solution, because we recognize that there's historic and architectural and aesthetic value to the bridge. So we were looking to as a restoration, number 1. But since then, we've also come to realize that historic restoration of historic structures such as bridges, etc., can also lead to unforeseen roadblocks and issues that may stall the project completely. So we're also looking at alternative 7, which is really the replacement of the bridge for purely pedestrian use. So no longer for traffic use, just for pedestrian and cyclists. And I guess really to just demonstrate our, willingness to work with the townships, we went ahead and we did like an informal estimate. And we worked with the people within the group, as well as the Guelph to Goderich administration team and their expertise, and the Eagle Bridge Company in Kitchener. And we came up with some informal estimates. I think we have a document at the back of this deck, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's a PDF at the very end. Might be worth showing that. And if not, that's okay. So we performed this very informal cost study based on the expertise of Guelph to Goderich Trail Association. Eagle Bridge Company did an estimate for us, and we came back with an estimate that we could replace this bridge for under $500,000. And not only that, but we actually see some opportunity to maybe even reduce that. Yeah, there it is there. And that study, although it's informal, like I say, we have the backing of some very supportable team with this thing. So Eagle Bridge did this. Sorry, I can't quite read that, but so between site prep, the removal of the old structure, the abutment rehab, etc. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. We come up to about $480,000, but we've also got a couple of really interesting initiatives that might come to fruition if we're able to proceed with it. One is employing the Army to do a removal. Another one is to redesign the structure to be a single span structure and avoid the center pier rehabilitation altogether. Even avoid rehabilitation of the existing abutments and go to an external, they call it an outboard block abutment. All of those have been deployed by the G2G Association very successfully for a lower cost solution in very similar conditions to the situation, I should say. So although all of this is a bit premature, hopefully it's of interest to you and shows that we're willing to look for solutions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Stephanie or Mark? Oh, and Councilor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that presentation and some background information. I think your ask is let us look for other funding options. You did a whole lot of homework on options to do this, which impressed me. What ideas do you have on funding solutions other than the township? Do you go some grants, or is there fundraising efforts that can be done by groups like your own?
Well, yeah, for sure. If we get to that stage, which we're hopeful that we do, our group is definitely interested in being part of the solution financially. We know there's infrastructure funding out there. We hope there is for active transportation, for instance, and recreational funding, for trailways, etc. But in terms of either public or corporate funding, we're definitely willing to research and work towards that thing.
We have had group members reach out to ask if they could donate money prior over the last 2 years that we've been representing the bridge, but we can't do anything until both councils agree to move forward. And so we do have people ready with cash, apparently.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the delegates, would you be looking for a commitment from this council for the portion that we would have put forth to demolish this bridge, regardless of what happens from here on out? And the reason that I asked that question is that I'm mindful that if we go forward with demo in 2028, it's going to be a certain value, whereas if we defer this decision, it could balloon that expense into the future. So I'm just wondering what the expectations would be moving forward.
I think up until this point, we were working with the figures that you had already budgeted for, which I believe is 720,000 shared between the two townships. Those are the only figures that we've seen. Those are the only figures that we know about. We have heard from Central Wellington that they'd be willing to discuss with you how that would be moving forward. We're also mindful of maintenance costs moving forward. If you remove the bridge, there's nothing to maintain. If you replace the bridge, there's ongoing maintenance costs. What do those look like? Who shares them? I believe you own the superstructure, not Central Wellington. So all of these things are up for discussion. So in the short answer would be, we would hope that you would still offer the budgeted amount for the removal, which is half of those removals costs, and that would remain there as the base point. Does that make sense?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, thank you for that. It does make sense. And I do appreciate, much like Councillor Swint, some of the work that you've done with some of these cost estimates. When I'm reflecting back on the 7 alternatives that you suggested, I'm looking at alternative 5 as only being $100,000 more than rehabilitating the bridge for just pedestrian and cyclist use. I'm wondering if you would put more thought into that as an option, from the standpoint of the Mennonite community being able to use that bridge for buggy traffic, perhaps. But I'm also wondering if we go forward with this conception that we want this exclusively for pedestrian or for cyclists, would that limit your ability to access some grants, for instance, at the federal level or at the provincial level? And I guess the third piece to that, sorry to kind of throw everything at you all at once, is I'll challenge you a little bit on what you had both put in your report and what you stated, that you can't really research this until you get that commitment from both councils. Well, I recognize that you can't apply for any funding. I would be interested to know if you've learned about any that you would apply for, say tomorrow, if we did vote in favor of reconsidering this.
Well, yeah, that's true. We have actually identified funding sources, one being the Active Transportation Fund, Infrastructure Fund, which is a provincial fund, I believe it was. We spoke with various levels of government about fleshing out those sources of funding if possible. Michael Chung, Ted Arnott, other politicians, certainly we've talked to their offices previously about that. So we maybe haven't identified all of those sources in detail, but we know they're there, and we haven't pursued the details to say, yeah, this fund exists and it would fund our project for this amount. As Stephanie said, we weren't going down that path until we had some ability to actually pursue it, per se.
And as per the Mennonite use of the bridge for buggies, I understand your point. We weren't in a position to meaningfully engage the community that uses the bridge in that way. We felt that was missing in the environmental assessment that was done initially in 2018. So should the councils agree to reconsider, we are hoping communities all use this bridge, which would include the Mennonite community. And if it's needed for buggies, it's needed for buggies. So we weren't in a position to be asking those questions. From our personal use of the bridge, yes, it is well used by Mennonite families. So if we would love to have another meeting and hear how they would like to use the bridge.
And the other part of your question was relative to eliminating, I guess, our eligibility for active transportation funding. I hope that wouldn't be the case, because most active transportation isn't purely cycling or pedestrian, it's shared use.
Yeah.
Whether it be for buggies or cars and trucks. So I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, no engines.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. What was the motion that was made by Senator Wellington, or have they passed a motion to reconsider? I'm not totally up to date on what they've done.
They are, we have Councillor McDonald here, who led the motion. The motion was passed that they would you like to speak? Go ahead.
Okay, so my motion was, basically, clerk, you can find it in the agendas with Senator Wellington, July 31st, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
That's so many meetings. The motion I made was to direct staff, we have to delegate it to our CAO and our staff to have those conversations, including Middlebrook Advocacy Group, and to have those conversations with Woolwich Township, which I believe there has been some conversations. And so that was how the motion I made was directed. We had a unanimous vote in favor to have those conversations, but it also has ingratiated us as Senator Wellington to future if they needed a letter of support or those things. But once we've directed the staff, they've been directed then to come back to us, and then we'll make those decisions. In Ward 1, I have 6 bridges, including this one. We're doing an EA study on 5, and I can let you know that I've not received any complaints about Middlebrook Bridge with the fact that it needed it for cars. It was just strictly biking, walking, active transportation. That seems to be the need for that bridge. In the other 5, we're currently doing that study now, so I can't really comment on the outcome of those, but that is just in my ward what we're looking at. So this is one of them, equaling 6 in total. So that was all I can speak on that motion, but it was unanimous, and so now our staff can have those conversations with you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Through you, Mayor Shawns, the motion that Township of Senator Wellington passed was that the council of the Township of Senator Wellington direct staff to consult with the Township of Woolwich and the Save Middlebrook Bridge Community Group to investigate new options.
Are there other questions of these delegates? I hope there is one more to speak to us yet tonight. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you again. Thank you.
And our second delegate on this is Dr. Ann Crow of the Grand Watershed Trails Network. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mayor Shawns and Council, for their attention. I'm a past chair of the Grand Watershed Trails Network, and we voted in favor of supporting the Safe the Middlebrook Bridge organization. Can you go on to the next slide, please? The vision of our organization is to create a network, and an emphasis on network of connected land and water trails following the Grand River and its tributary. And it's more than just providing trails, it's to connect people and communities through heritage, cultural, and outdoor experiences. And the picture shows the size and shape of the watershed, which goes through a good chunk of southwestern Ontario. It's a very, very large area. Next slide, please. So this is just a map of the main trail and shows all the hiking, biking trail, and also the little blue circles and the access points to the river. You can see there are multiple places along the river where you can access it. Goes all the way from the Dundalk Highlands down to the mouth of Lake Erie. It's an enormous asset to our communities along the river. Next slide, please. This shows a map of the Grand Trail through St. Wellington and Woolwich. The green is multi-use trails, and you can see your area is blessed with a load of multi-use trails. Our main trail uses the Elora Cataract Rail Trail and the Cottontail Road Trail. The black and the gray are paved roads and unpaved roads, which are quiet, friendly roads. The orange, there's a couple of little sections of orange, which is roads that are busier and or highways. So I should say it connects in this area, it connects Grand Valley and Dundalk from the north to Waterloo region and Guelph in the south, and also through things like the Guelph Godrich Trail. It connects in multiple places to the Waterfront Trail in Owen Sound, in Hamilton, down at Lake Erie, the multiple additional connectors. And in Waterloo region, the reason this goes in both directions on Godrich is that in Waterloo region, it's actually a loop that goes through St. Jacob's, Kitchener, Waterloo, and then across the Guelph and around. So the next slide. So why save Middlebrook Bridge? We know that rivers and highways create barriers to walking and cycling that discourage people from becoming active. We know that recreational and traveling hikers and cyclists prefer loops. They don't want to go down a trail and back up the same trail. They much prefer to go on a loop. Middlebrook Road is a very safe alternate route from Aurora to Westmont Road. And the Middlebrook Bridge creates alternate loops for both hikers on the Grand Valley Trail, which is shown in brown on that map, and for people using the Grand Trail. Next slide. So this shows why not use Wilson's Flats Bridge? And I think this, I took a Google Street View shot of the Wilson's Flats Bridge, and I think anybody that's done any cycling or hiking and being confronted with a bridge like this, which can potentially have truck traffic and has no cycling or pedestrian facilities, it's very intimidating, and a lot of people would just not, they wouldn't, if it was a young family, you would just not take a permanent bridge. So Township Road 60 Weisenberg Road is much quieter. There's no pedestrian or cycling facilities on Wilson Flats. And in addition, Middlebrook Bridge is an attractive historical bridge and a cultural asset. So I would just like to say that our organization is next actually supports saving Middlebrook Bridge as an important local cultural and heritage asset and active transportation connectivity.
Thank you. Are there questions?
I'm just thinking. No, as you know, heritage has always been my thing, and we only have 3 steel truss bridges in Woolwich Township, and all 3 of them basically are in my ward. I would like to make a motion to direct staff to continue discussions with Centre Wellington and see if there's a way of saving this bridge within our budget parameters and move forward from there.
Is there a seconder? Councilor Burgess? Are there any questions for the delegation before we consider this? Here.
For staff.
For staff, oh, sorry. No, it's for staff table, for staff, thank you very much. Mr. Cooper, I'm assuming it's for Jared or maybe not?
Or maybe for Mr. Brenneman. I'm just curious what effect this resolution would have. I'm guessing if Centre Wellington calls our staff, we have conversations, we just don't write checks. And how much conversation can happen about us taking action at this point? Sure, I love the idea of saving a bridge. I don't love the idea of writing a check. So I did like creative ideas you brought forward on funding, and your budgeting was a whole lot better than the staff budgeting I've seen on Pillsbury Bridge. And I know my neighborhood, right across the road from Centre Wellington, I have individuals put a bridge up for 1 less digit than what you're even proposing. So I think there is creative ways. Sometimes the less government's involved, the better. But how do we create those groups to do the work?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to council. So Mr. Coupe and I have had one meeting with our counterparts already. I would say that the discussion focused on preparing for potential directions for both of our respective councils. I guess to make it easy, I can advise that our staff recommendation to Woolwich Council would be that if you want to go ahead and revisit this, that we should do so in the context of our budget process. Because you realize from last week in our budget parameters report, you're facing a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties. You also want to have further discussions with respect to the Peel Street Bridge. And there is only so much funding and money. And so it's going to be another difficult budget year for council. And so by all means, you can direct staff to revisit the issue and look at different options and alternatives. But we would still respectfully suggest you would do so ultimately and make any final decision on Middlebrook Bridge, the same time you're making decisions on Peel Street or any other budget priorities as part of the overall operating and capital budget discussions.
Thank you. I was just asking the clerk to clarify the wording of the motion, or maybe.
Whatever it makes sense. Sometimes you feel this out, it's like, what did I say exactly?
I think the intent was to not incur any additional cost.
To
And of course,
revisit.
there'd be some staff time.
Right.
But, what have you got there?
So through you, Mayor Shawns, first, I think I missed, either was looking at a different version or something like that of the resolution. But Mr. Coupe forwarded me I guess the motion that was actually passed at council, which is to direct staff to proceed with a new preferred option for the Middlebrook Trust Bridge Municipal Class EA. I believe alternative 7. And Mr. Coupe, maybe you can help me. Are you looking for a motion? If you wanted, or if council wanted to provide direction tonight, are you looking for sort of a similar motion to that, or something more simple, like what I suggested, or what I originally thought was the motion?
Mr. Coupe?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to council. So just for clarity, I did receive that from staff, so we'll have to look into that if that was the actual motion, Jeff, in fairness. But our understanding in meeting with Centre Wellington staff was that they will be presenting to Centre Wellington Council through their budget deliberation process, which is happening in October. So what we were preparing to do was to provide this council with information related to both the Middlebrook EA process as well as the Peel Street Bridge process as directed by staff or council at the committee whole meeting last week. And we are actively preparing that. We were then going to wait and see what the direction was from Centre Wellington Council to their staff as they are looking in the context of the overall budget process. And to CEO Brenneman's comments, we would agree wholeheartedly that it would be staff's position that we look at this in the context of the broader budget process and not in isolation. I think that's very important. And then council can make a fulsome decision on what they want to do. We have, at very minimal cost, done some exploratory work. We visited the bridge with our engineers this past week, and we've done some sampling of the piers and abutments as well to determine the validity, because we appreciate the good work that the delegates have done, and I think it was worthy to explore some of those options in a little greater detail, and we can provide council with that information and those findings through our information report.
Yeah, that would be good. And then if the group can also explore their options as Eric suggested, as far as funding, I think that's where we're going to have to go with a lot of our projects, is see what we can raise externally.
So the motion on the floor might be.
I think if I heard you correctly, Councilor Bryan, I think I just heard direct staff to continue communicating with Centre Wellington.
True, yes.
On this and continue to look forward.
Yeah, continue the discussions.
To the discussion.
Councilor Bridges?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shawns, Director Coupe or Mr. Smith, Director Smith, just clarity on what the next steps would be for Mark and Stephanie, like if they want to start fundraising or look at alternative options. Can they start doing that now, or are we gonna need to go through the budget process determine our options then and approve that before they can start looking at that? Or what are the steps for them going forward?
And through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess, I think the challenge that the delegates have is because the decision is to remove and not replace it, funding is not really an option at this point from upper government levels. We need to have a decision that's different so that you could apply for funding. If councils both were to decide that a pedestrian only bridge was there, then you can start to look for funding that would be appropriate. But because it's remove and not to be replaced is the current decision that there's really no funding available. That's the short answer.
So there's no funding that can be, funding can't be applied for, but you could do some research as to what's out there. If you felt like you wanted to put that time into it until you have a final answer. Councillor Cadeau, you had your hand up? Did I miss your hand?
No, I mean, it's fine. Through you, Mayor. I suppose what we're really looking at is whether or not we're making a decision to defer the removal. And if that's the decision that's being made here, then the delegates can go back and start to apply for funding and whatnot. I guess my concern with that would be at what point do we put an end to that delay or that deferral? So if we were to go ahead with this, you know, are we giving 2 years to research and apply for funding before we make that determination that, you know what, it's not going to happen, it does have to come down? So have we thought about, you know, sunset clause or anything with respect to putting brakes on the removal of this? Is that something that this council may want to consider as we progress forward in deliberations, not only about Peel Street, but about Middlebrook as well?
If I could maybe try to put the pieces together in my mind here. Mr. Poupet, you were suggesting that you would continue to do some work with Centre Wellington and bring some kind of report back to council, or would that report be part of the budget process?
Yeah, to you, Mayor Shantz and council, the approach is to provide this council with information related to Peel and Middlebrook, just to explain how we arrived where we are today. We can further add some information that we have found out on the Middlebrook Place Bridge as well as part of some of those inspections. I think that would be appropriate to include in that information. And then we would simply wait for Centre Wellington's deliberations with their council through their budget process. I think that's that's an important piece. If Centre Wellington is deciding to move forward with looking at alternative options, then we can discuss that further through our budget deliberation process. So we see that a decision is likely in the very short term, and it can be decided if council wants to revisit. We would recommend a public meeting. If that was to be the case by both councils, we certainly think that that would be appropriate and not do that in isolation of going out to the public. And we can go forward from there. If the decision remains the same, then to Councillor Cadeau's comments, it's just a matter of when the removal would take place.
So when would you see your report coming to council? After Centre Wellington does their deliberation and in our budget process, or prior to that?
Yeah, based on, sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, you're right. If they're going to be speaking to their council in October, is our understanding. We can confirm that date. But you're right, it would likely come in around that same time. We could probably get a report in front of council here in October. We'll have to confer with staff tomorrow and determine what that date is, because really it's rehashing what's already happened and then just putting together this new information that we have just on the condition. So we should be able to do that relatively quickly. I don't know exactly their date though for their budget deliberations in October, but it'll be in and around that same time.
And then further to Councillor Cadeau's question, the rest of the process would sort of be mapped out at such a time as both councils are agreeing to go further with it?
That's what we would envision, depending on what both councils decide to do, would then in turn change the approach, whether we are revisiting the previous decision and moving forward with a public meeting exploring options for pedestrian only, or any other option really, or if councils don't decide to move forward with that and continue to hold fast on the removal and not replace option, then it would just be a matter of slotting that into the appropriate time in a capital forecast.
Okay. Nathan, does that answer your question? Kind of, sort of? Councillor Schmidt.
So I guess that raises a couple more questions for me, because I hear October of this year, according to this year, or 2024 budget conversation. I thought I heard earlier this bridge was due for removal in 2028. So to me, that's 4 years away, not 4 months away. We've got some more time to play here, to do our work and make a good decision. My other big concern on this is, are we all speaking the same language? Because we went through a lot of conversation on the Peel Street Bridge last year, and that's a big budget number. Staff came up with doing their homework. We've got another group here that's done some homework, and the cost is not comparable. Like, we're different leagues. That's across the same river. I'm thinking it's essentially the same bridge. So something's not working for me. And I don't see that getting fixed in the next 4 months, let alone making a decision whether it's worth spending the money.
Mr. Coupé, do you see some of those concerns being answered in your report?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Schwint. I think you're right. There is some updates to the costing for sure. I can't imagine, and we will confirm this, but I did speak with the engineer today. I can't imagine we're going to be any less than $1 million to do a pedestrian only bridge in here. The center pier is not usable. The abutments are not quite usable, but there are options to explore. So I think there's more work to be done there. But it is a costly proposition. And I think that's why it's important to have this in the context of the overall budget process and not look at any of these in isolation. I think that's the important part. So again, I think let us provide information to council. I think that's still appropriate. That was requested. That'll come in October. Senator Wellington will be meeting with their council for budget deliberation in October. And depending on what the outcome is there, we can have further information presented to this council during budget deliberations. But I think you're absolutely right. There is some disconnect with some of the numbers.
Councillor Brian, just one quick question. I'm looking at the costing and the funding. For alternative 4, they've listed here 1.1 million. Is that the full cost, or is that their share of the cost? For Senator Wellington.
Those would be, or through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Bryant, those are total costs, but I think we have to take those for what they are. Those are high level EA estimates. We have greater information, better inspections now. We don't believe that it would be the best decision to rehabilitate the bridge. It would be a better decision to replace it with a new structure. I think the adage would be, it's a bit of a 40-year-old car that's been derelict. You can take it to a mechanic. They can fix any part they want, and you could drive away and have something else fall apart. So I think that's the real challenge we're into here. It's a very aged structure, and it has deteriorated rapidly. We did visit it recently, and we have pictures that we can share in that report and that information package as well. And we will be feeding that information to Senator Wellington staff so that they can share with their council. But the condition of the bridge has rapidly deteriorated. So we do believe that if there was to be a decision to put a pedestrian structure in, it would be a new structure, and you would not be utilizing the structure that exists there today.
Okay, those costs would be half of what are reflected on this chart. Is that correct? Or they would be the full amount that we would have to pay? I think we'd be at half.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Clarity on the motion yet?
I think I heard through you, Mayor Shantz. The Council Bryant moved the motion to direct staff to continue discussions with Senator Wellington and report back to council in October with more information.
Yeah. Okay. Evan, I think you seconded it. You're good with that. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, I think that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Step 1. We have one item for approval and no items for information on the consent agenda that we want to move. Yes, you wanted to move. Okay. So we have recommendations from committee of the whole. I have a motion for item 9.1.1.1 to 9 with the exception of 6. We're gonna pull the budget parameters report to simplify it. Moved by Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? And that's carried. Budget parameters report, Councillor Ryan.
I just wanted to make a comment since I was in the chair's position last week. I have heard from residents that are faced with mortgage costs that have doubled in the last year, food costs and everything rising, and they do not want to see an 8.5% budget again this year. They are very, very upset and unhappy with what was proposed, and they want to, pardon me, they want us to keep our costs down to the rate of inflation. I just wanted to pass those comments on.
Okay, Councillor Burgess.
Yeah, through Mayor John's council, I would just second basically what Councillor Bonnie's saying. Yeah, I've already had a few residents reach out to me, just saying they're surprised again, basically both years back to back, that's 16%. And we made front page of the Observer, which shows it's a big deal too. So, yeah, just want to be sensitive to residents' needs and see what we can do to try and make some cuts. I know it's not easy, we don't want to cut programs and stuff, but just, yeah.
Keep the numbers down.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other discussion? I think, I don't have that in front of me right at the moment, just a minute. I'm not sure that's actually in our package, is it?
It's under the summary of recommendations. Want to split there on the screen?
Councillor Cadeau?
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, I'm wondering if Director Plethoric could walk us through that 8.5% just one more time so that everybody's crystal clear on certain percentages and where they may be going. I think that you know, when I've been having conversations with residents and I kind of walk through how it's been explained to me, people nod a lot more, and I'm not saying that they agree with it by any stretch, but at least that justification helps to soften the blow, I guess.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cadeau's question. So the 8.5 is broken down into a 6% base. You know, which within the staff parameters report, we budget parameters report the staff brought last week, that 3% is what the anticipated inflation is going to be in 2024. We did also spell out that there are some other extenuating factors that are kind of pushing that number up, and specifically that there are other, I would say, inflationary numbers, and I was specifically referencing the vehicle costs that we're experiencing. That's kind of really what's driving some of that, because we know that we have some expensive vehicles coming up and we need to be putting more money away to be able to replace those. The other part is putting an additional 1.5% for the infrastructure levy. That would just over 200,000, that would be raised by that, as well as 1% for the climate action greening levy. And I think that was about 143,000 that would be added in 24. That's what the proposal was. So a 6 plus 1.5 plus 1.
And I see here that we also said to propose an alternate 4% base, and so that we can compare that. And I think we also need to, as you pointed out, think about some of the costs that we can't control or that have been preset, and then what piece of that is to keep our services, our existing services going as they are. So there is a direction here to also bring back a 4% operating. The other two pieces we're free to do as we decide in the budget deliberations on. So I think it's really the base that staff need to work at. So did you want something different than a 4%?
No, I just said, just comments.
Okay. Mr. Patrick, is that still clear and enough guidance?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay, can we, can I have a motion on that one then? Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Schwint. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And we will wrestle this when the time comes, I'm quite sure. Okay, quarterly report, Mr. Patrick, it's your night.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I should have left my camera on. So before council tonight is the second quarterly report. It's not lost on me that we are talking about this as we are approaching the end of the third quarter. But our schedules are kind of what they are. So really kind of going over some of the highlights from the financial perspective. To the end of June, so the end of the second quarter, we had a net levy operating budget spent of $6.5 million, which gave us, I guess I would say a positive operating budget variance. You can consider that in a surplus position of 0.69%. That's about 91,000. I would also reiterate, and I think I've said this in the first quarter report, you know, this is just a gauge. This is a year to date, so it's kind of a gauge and a comparative about where we are, but it's not a definitive financial position. It's just a year to date of where we are. Some of the things just to highlight from the high level from the report. I think I said that even in the first quarterly report, and it's still applicable what would be a quarterly report without talking about winter control budget. And we did have some additional expenditures, not surprisingly, in the second quarter. We're still sitting pretty good comparatively to previous years. We have one just shy of $200,000 left in that budget area. So depending on how the winter of 23-24 starts, depending on how that budget is going to kind of bear itself. If we have a really tough start to the winter, I can easily see that budget being into a deficit, but if we have a very mild start to the winter, we could be doing very well. But as I said, we're in a much better position than we have been for quite a number of years. One of the other things I want to highlight, and this is where I'm going to be seeking some direction from council, and we need a motion, I guess, one way or the other. It's a little bit tag on to what we talked about within the audited statements, and that is with the additional dividend that we received from the Innova investment that we had. So we did receive about $224,000 greater than we budgeted. I can say that that money is not in these numbers, so it's actually completely excluded from these numbers right now. So it is kind of being held off to the side until we can make a decision, or at least council can make a decision on what we'll be doing with that. Back in the end of June, council was directing staff to do some additional grading within the Reedswood Drive. I think the cost estimate was about $8,700, and we were looking at where we can find money for that. And I was suggesting we could take it from this additional dividend. If we do that, that'll leave about $215,000, with which we need to decide what we're going to be doing with. My recommendation to council is to put that in the operating contingency reserve. I'm projecting a balance in this reserve of about $198,000, and I think as the report indicates, we should be much higher than that in that reserve. I can tell you this is a reserve that the previous council, and probably Mayor Sean's the previous council, has been debating about what to do, because we've been very tight within that reserve, and it doesn't leave us a lot of wiggle room when we have some unexpected stuff. So being able to put more money into that reserve is going to be able to help us as we go forward. So whatever council decides they would like to do with that, I would just need a motion so that I can be able to fulfill that. From the water and wastewater side, from the wastewater, we are in a deficit position at the end of June. And no different than what I said in the first quarter report, the wet weather we've been experiencing has been really significant to us, and specifically because of the inflow and infiltration issues we've been having. If you recall last week at the committee of the whole, we, and of course just tonight, we finalized the tender for the CIPP, so that's the sewer lining, because we have significant I&I issues. As we start to do this, we'll start to tighten up systems. But that also means that right now we're dealing with a lot of the groundwater and the other flows seeping into the sewer system, and in turn, basically gets into the regional wastewater treatment plant. Then in turn, we get charged for that. I can say that as we progress through 23 from that second quarter, so that July-August period, it was a little dry, so that was good. So I have seen that deficit number actually decrease over July and August statements. see how the remainder of the year goes. It could creep back up. If we continue dry, they go down. I still suspect by the end of the year, we're gonna be a deficit in our wastewater. That's my suspicion, but as I said, we'll kind of see, we'll circle back on that as we present the third quarter report, probably in November. From the water side, this is the good news. So if you recall, during the surplus deficit report, and that was from the 2022 year end, that we were a pretty significant deficit in our water operations to about $1 million. I was saying one of the issues was the water billing, that we knew that there were some accounts that we weren't billing because we were just doing estimates. We were able to start tackling these ones. So we're in a pretty decent surplus position, about 386,000 at the end of the second quarter. I can tell you that we have been maintaining that surplus, so that's a good news. That means if we ended up right now, we'd actually be putting money back into the reserve that we took out from the end of 2022. So as I said, that was something that we were looking at. It is starting to come to fruition. So for me, that's a kind of a good news, and hopefully we'll continue to maintain that even when there are any other leaks. From a capital side, just from the second quarter perspective, you would see that the activities would be continuing from the beginning of the year till that point. We are continuing to work through our capital program, but the capital budget are appended to this report. Is actually kind of laying out and giving some highlights to council as to where some of the projects are and whether some projects may be looking to be extended in 2024. So with that, Madam Mayor, I would open the floor to answer for questions.
Questions? Councillor Grant.
I don't have a question, but Richard was looking for a motion to put the money into reserves. I would be willing to make that motion.
Okay, someone like to second that? You can't second.
Sorry, Mayor Shantz, I had a question. I think Mr. Petherick suggested that some of it might be directed to the grading of Reedwoods Drive. Was that also?
He had asked for a motion to put money into a reserve fund.
Yeah,
I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Did you need permission on it, or did you need a motion for the other piece as well?
Madam Mayor, it'd be great to have direction on the council's okay to continue to allow about $8,700 of that to remain within the operating budget, and that would be a revenue source for the infrastructure services to cover some of those costs.
Why don't we put that in the motion and just make it
Yeah,
clear
that's
then?
fine.
Councillor Bridges?
Through you to Mr. Patrick, Director Patrick. With the detour and stuff, are we getting reimbursed on that grading? And can we look at using those funds?
And to you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Coupe might need to jump on and correct me if I'm wrong. We have built the region for some of the regrading of, I believe, both Ridgewood and Tillman Drive. I'm not so sure it was all of the passes that our staff did, but definitely we have built the region back for some of the work that we've done on those roads.
Mr. Coupe?
You, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess, Mr. Petherick is correct. I don't think we've built all of the grading activities back yet, but we have been sending some substantial bills to them.
So your question was, do we need to use those funds for that with charging that? Yes, we
Yeah,
do.
through Madam Mayor, I think that's the fair question is you know, I guess through Mr. Coupe, the question would be, are we billing back all of the costs that we would have experienced by all of the additional grading works we would have done on Ridgewood as well as Tillman? I'm not sure, but I'm certainly sure about that.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, to council is it is cost recovery only. There's no profit obviously in there. It is our time and energies being expended and taking us away from our other activities. So it's a bit of a challenge that way. We'd rather be doing other things, but yes, it is full cost recovery.
So is it full cost recovery?
We put the whole thing into operating contingency.
Correct.
I still meant the seconder. Did you second that?
Well, do we want to amend it?
I think we just did.
Okay, so I'll second that we
Yeah,
Okay, so the whole amount goes into operating contingency.
Mm.
But could you, give me a sense for what would be a reasonable percentage of operating costs to carry in an operating contingency? I know this is incredibly low.
So through Madam Mayor, kind of contained within this report, I did indicate that our reserve fund bylaw dictates or kind of advises that 20% of our operating budget should be put into the reserve. So that should be the ceiling limit. And for 2023, we're looking at about $2.6 million. So with the projected balance at the end of 2023 of being 198,000, we're significantly shy from that ceiling.
Just to put it in perspective. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor?
I think you still need a second.
No.
Oh my God, sorry.
All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. We'll get to this evening, yeah. That's where we happen, right? Okay, mayor's report on regional matters. The thing I wanted to highlight, I had a request for rail safety week. Some councils will declare special weeks. We don't do those kind of declarations, but I said I would acknowledge that September 18th to 24th is Rail Safety Week. 232 railway crossing and trespassing incidents occurred in Canada in 2022, resulting in avoidable fatalities and serious injuries. We join CN in urging both motorists and pedestrians to exercise care and caution along railways and especially at railway crossings. So I have that. Other things that the region, we're starting to look at budget as well, and some strategic planning. So that's sort of an ongoing thing, and I'll try to keep the forwarding cleaner to keep you informed. Any council reports? Councilor Cador.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to council, a couple of things to update on. I want to say thank you to the organizers of the Hope Multicultural Festival. So that happened this Saturday. I would say it was a huge success from what I saw. Great food, great performances, and an overall great atmosphere. So just wanted to share that message with council. If you maybe had the opportunity to go. It was great. The second one is Mayor Sean's, Councillor Burgess, and Councillor Swint and I had a tour of Lanxness. So thank you to the staff there at Lanxness that walked us through the site, showed us some of the operation, as well as walked us through the ongoing work that's happening with the on-site remediation. So it really helped to understand the operations there and the process of mediation.
Thank you. Thank you to Amy Cooper, who spearheaded the multicultural festival. I think it was a great success, and it's been a good year for Woolwich Township with our first ever Pride event and our first ever multicultural event. And I think it bodes well for the future. Thanks for bringing that up. Anyone else? Councillor Smith,
Wait for a question. Had an informal conversation with staff last week, and the resident contacted me. This year is Elmira's 150th anniversary. I know it'll be on, 100th anniversary. And I know there was a homecoming, I guess, committee that tried to get going, couldn't get going last fall or winter. Would it be appropriate for council to ask staff to come up with some sort of a lower key event or later on this fall or before the holidays at the Memorial Center, just to acknowledge the fact and some history? Wouldn't have to cost a lot of money or be a huge event, but combine with the Sugar King ceremony and swimming and a cake and just an acknowledgement of our past and what Elmira is today.
Ms. MacArthur, are you there? Can you speak to that one?
Sure, absolutely. Through you, Madam Chair. Staff can certainly look at that and put something together, maybe reach out to a few groups that may want to display some articles from, over that period and then look to some dates. So we'll come back to council with some ideas, maybe in a few weeks, to see if it's something that, you want to support. And I guess some direction is timing. If you had mentioned the Sugar Kings, which is an opportunity, but is it a weekday event, a weeknight or weekend, and something that council wants to host or something that staff puts on? So just a little bit of direction on what you would like to see occur, and we'd be happy to look into that.
Council, any thoughts or direction for Danny?
I would think a weekend would attract more people, we want to attract youth. And people who are not working 9 to 5.
I have a quick comment I can offer. Is there anything that we could leverage to help to celebrate this event? And I'm just thinking out loud. I know the Elmira BIA is going to be hosting their Moonlight Madness coming up. I think it's in November. Are there any avenues that we can explore in association with the BIA or other organizations that would be a nice confluence, I guess? And I think that something like that with the BIA and their Moonlight Madness could be a really nice feature.
Through you, Madam Chair, we can explore that as well and report back on what we can put together with any other groups.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else with ideas or suggestions? Okay, is that something that we would need further direction on sooner than later, or in an October meeting?
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll come back in a couple of weeks, but in the interim, if any of the board councillors have some contacts that we could reach out to that might have something that they want to celebrate or join part of, just send an email and we'll just explore those avenues, trying to be mindful of staff's time and their existing work plans and creating something too significant, but we'd like to do something small that can acknowledge the achievement milestone for sure.
And that those logistics can be done through email too. It doesn't have to be at a council meeting. Councillor Cadeau.
Yeah, just with respect to timelines, is this something, Councillor Schwint, that you would be looking to accomplish before the end of the calendar year?
That was my thought and hope.
Yeah. Okay, so there is, a bit of a time crunch there.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. MacArthur. Anything else from the council? Okay. Outstanding activity list, anything on there? Not seeing any, there is no notice of motion. We need a motion that the bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 58-2023 to 65-2023. That they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal, and you can read those bylaws on your agenda. I remover. Councillor Flint seconded. Councillor Bryan, to all those in favor. And that's carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the agenda. As I turn the page, does anyone want to move adjournment? Councillor Burgess, Councillor Cadeau, all those in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. In closing, council would like to thank all who participated, attended, or tuned in to the meeting tonight. Council can stay connected on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And good night, everyone.